more involved. Now, consumers they don't understand the electricity system. This is I'm talking about. We do surveys of how do people understand? Do they understand their bill? Do they understand how the system works in a market for electricity? Is the Danish one? Do they know the name of their provider? They usually don't. They usually don't understand the bill, and they're not really interested until now. Now, low level of trust, engagement, and interest. I believe that you do have a lot of engagement. You don't have a lot of trust, and the interest is there. But what to do as a consumer? And I was really warned by the initiative for demand-side management that we are seeing here with a three-pronged approach seems to be really going down the right way. There are lots of details in it, and it has to be put, and I think that was also said, into action. That's the proof of the pudding. But really, to take these initiatives towards the customers is really important. Now, why? And we have a lot of experts here on the network. How can we say that each little consumer with his, and I'd say even small enterprises, 10, 20, 50 people, how can their behavior have any impact on the system? And I think Barry said it very well, that in a sector like the one we are in now, we are used to a centralized approach. The power is being generated and we just push it to consumers. They use it, and that's the end of it. We make sure it balances, that the network is adequate. But we are now in a different situation. The renewables are coming in. People are beginning to produce energy. We in our visit this time to South Africa, we've seen people setting up huge PV systems, or we hear about dams, smaller dams that also have a pretty good capacity, that are only allowed to put a certain amount into the network. So there is already, and there's coming more and more potential for seeing consumers as contributing, of course, electricity to the network, but also, and this is what we're talking about here, they contribute flexibility. They contribute with how they manage their usage. And how are we going to do that? How are we going to get all these consumers of different sizes, of very different shapes and usages? I thought Barry's slide showing, an old slide showing that even, how many years, 20 years ago, 30 years ago, it was clear that if you wanted to engage with consumers, you're going to have to spend a lot of energy, a lot of people hours to engage with them. And that's really where the question of aggregators come in. Now, aggregators, or let's call it the aggregation function, because the distributor or a supplier in the future of this country, also when you have divested and created markets, the supplier, the distributor can have an aggregator function. And as we have in Denmark and in many European countries, because of the common energy policy, we have aggregators who are specialized in talking to people about their flexibility, that can go to a middle-sized company and say, just as you have here, 3 things: how can you save energy, and how can you use it? How can you use it more flexibly, and how can your operation actually become more efficient when you use energy? These are people who are not grid planners or people with the kind of background that is needed. Here, there are people who are business-oriented with a knowledge of the sector, of how you use energy, and they have an interest in aggregating the demand. Every little piece of demand flexibility will matter, and both at the DSO level and at the TSO level. Just to say, we've been talking to several people here where we can see the thinking that your demand has an effect on the system, that you can, through doing something with your demand, actually help the system, is a new thought. And we have to make sure that we get people involved that are specialized in getting this flexibility on board. And the way to do it is to make sure that there is an interest, that people can see that they get paid. And I think it's a really good idea to roll out the smart meters, because that's key to getting the flexibility on board. But the way I read, or what I hear about smart meters here, is that they are primarily a way from a central approach to steer the demand, or to limit the demand. The way we use them in Denmark is the other way around. We use them to incentivize people through pricing to manage their own demand, so that they actually do understand and they can optimize the production in their plant, or their family life, or the charging of their car themselves. That it's also empowering to be able to do it yourself. And I think that will probably also be the future here, once you get it more rolled out, and you can use the pricing system to get people incentivized. Now, the aggregator function can be with the distribution company, but what we see in Denmark, our experience is that the interest is not so great. The reason is, as explained by Carolyn, that, and also alluded to by Barry, if there is a lot of excess capacity in the network, you're looking at maybe 40% of the distribution network can, in a period, have use of flexibility. For the rest, it makes more sense just to build out. And the reason why the reason why they then do not engage so much in flexibility is that we see a split incentive, because there is a lot of use in the rest of the system. The system operator, if a DSO balances and takes care of if the distribution network takes care of more balance in its network, it helps the TSO. It helps it both in balancing and also in reserve capacity. And the users who are engaged by an aggregator will get paid for giving flexibility, also earns. So what you have is really a situation of what we call split incentives. The one who's supposed to do it doesn't see all the benefits, and therefore will be less active. And that's why we want to get aggregators in who can make sure that there's a complete monetization of the flexibility, and that every participant in flexibility, the DSO, the supplier, the customer, is actually rewarded for being active. And I think that's part of what you will be looking at when you roll out your program, the DSM program, that make sure that all participants are rewarded, are incentivized monetarily, because otherwise you will see, and we see that in some of the other countries that Caroline and her colleagues work with, that if there is no economic incentive flexibility will not be sustained. Excuse me a second.